What's up guys, this is Professor Spawn, and in this tutorial we are going to start off with the control flow or the control statements in Kotlin programming language. So this control statements is not like specific to Kotlin, but this is generally everywhere used in any programming language. So what are control statements? So control statements are a statement that determines whether the other statement will be executed or whether the block will be executed or not, right? So that basically actually controls the flow of your execution, right? So there are various ways of doing this writing this control statements in Kotlin. So those are specifically, yeah, using the keyword as if, using when, using for, and using while, right? So we are going to see this one by one each in this tutorial. So let's start with our control statement. So inside this Kotlin package, I'm going to create a new package, and I'm going to name this as control flow, right? I'm going to name this as control flow, and I'm going to have a Kotlin class file named as control statements demo, right? So I have created a new Kotlin file as control statements demo, and I'm going to create our function main, right? And inside this we are going to write our control flow statements, right? So the first thing first, we are going to demo about the if statement, right? So I'm going to have this if statement. Let's say that you have two variable, which is a is holds the value of 5, and val b holds the value of 10, right? And let's say that you want to check whether the a is greater than b or not. If it is greater than b, assign the value variable max with a, right? So initial value for max, I'm going to have this 0. So let's write that, control statement. So I'm going to have this if block here, and I'm going to check here as a is greater than b. If it is, then assign max to be a, right? So here, so this is a fundamental error I did here. I'm going to assign this as var, right? Because this we can reassign it. So I have assigned this 0, and I'm again reassigning it to be a, right? So let's print this max value here. So I'm going to print this up, and let's run this code. So if you run this code, you will see the output as 0, and it doesn't really make sense because I want the maximum value, right? So what I did here is I have written this if statement. This is basically a statement, right? And this is also one statement. So in this statement, I have checked, I have told inside this if block, I have written if a is greater, this is an operator, right? This you see here, this is an operator which checks for if the left hand side of the variable is greater than the right hand side of the variable. If it is not, it returns false, right? So that's why when this block will be executed, if 5 is greater than 10, which is not, so this returns false, and this block will not get executed. That's why we are getting this value as 0, right? But this is, like ambiguous. I don't want 0. I want the maximum between the two. So how do you do that? So to do that, I'm going to again have this else block, and I'm going to have max is equals to b, and let's run this code. So I'm going to run this code, and I'm going to have this value as 10, right? So this return me false. This doesn't get executed. As we are comparing two variables, I'm going to have this else, and I'm going to say that the b is the maximum between the two, right? So this is how you control the flow of the program, right? This is just one very simple program using if statement, and rather I could say that using else statement you can have only single ifs, you can have if else, right? So there is also one more statement which is called as when statement, right? if you are aware of Java, this is the when statement is as good as switch statements in Java or switch statements in C++ or C, right? So I'm going to, demo this. So for that, I'm going to write here one function which will, have this when. I'm going to have this when, and I'm going to pass this x to be of int, right? And I'm going to, I have to, rename this to when demo because I cannot have the function name with the keyword, with any of this keyword, right? I cannot have if, I cannot have anything, right? I cannot have this. I need to rename this. So I'm going to have this as when demo, right? So here I'm going to have this when of x, right? So I'm here writing this when expression, and inside this I'm going to write as 1 with this arrow, right? And I'm going to print ln. I'm going to have this one, right? One block. I'll say one block. So don't worry about this arrow. We are going to discuss this. This is basically called as lambda expression, right? So this tells that this is a function. This is as good as executing a function, right? So we are going to discuss that in the later demo. But for now, to have this when expression, to write a when expression, you need to have this when inside this bracket. You pass this x, and you have this block here, right? So this is one case. You can have other case as well. Let's say 2, and I'm going to have this print line of second block. I can have the second block, and when you are done, there should always be a default case. So for default case, you need to have this else, and I'm going to have print ln of, let's say, other block. I'm going to have this as other block. I'm going to name this as other block. So what does this do? So let's call this when demo here, and I'm going to pass here as value, let's say 3, right? So a value 3 will be passed here, and I'm writing here as when of x, where it will be 3, and it will check all these cases, right? If x is 1, no. If x is 2, no. So there is a default case, right? After all these cases are done, there is a default case, and as we have here 3, this block will be executed. So let's run this code. I'm going to run this code, and I'm going to have the output as other block. So I will change this as print new line, right? As this has come in a single line, I'm going to run this again. So this is how you write a when statement. So if you are aware of Java, how do you write it? You write here as switch of x, and inside this block you write case 1, case 2, and you have this default block, right? But in Kotlin it's very simple. You just do when of x, and inside this block you define your cases, and you define your default cases as well, right? So this is all about when demo or when statement, and then we again have one more which we call it as a for loops, right? Or loops, where you want to, you want some block to be executed x number of times, right? So that you can do it using for loops. So I'm going to again create a new function, and here I'm going to have this for loop demo, and I'm going to create a function for loop demo, and I'm going to, we will have this function here. So I'm going to create this for loop demo here, and I'm not passing any argument, right? I'm not passing any argument, and in this I am going to run a code, right? Or run a for loop, right? So to run a for loop, for now we are going to have something called as range. For I in 1.3, print ln of I. I'm going to have this I, right? Or rather I want, yeah, so I'm going to have this I here. So what does this do is this will loop the this between this range from 1 to 3, and each value will be assigned to this, and we will have this value here, right? So let's run this code. Like, what does this for loop do, right? We are going to use for loop a lot in our code, and if you see here inside this for loop demo, you see here the value as 1. When it loops through this range, the first value you will get is 1. So the I will be 1 during the first execution, and we will have this I value as 1. It will again loop it through to the value 2. So as we are looping through the range, after 1 we have 2, the I value will be 2, and we will have here as 2, right? And again we will have the last value as 3, and we are getting this 3, right? So it's not just that you can loop it through the range, but you can, loop it through, let's say, through an array of integers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this an int array, and I'm going to have this int array of 1 comma 4 3 comma 6, right? 6 comma 9, and I'm going to loop through this array, and I'm going to have this each value here, right? And I'm going to print this println of I, right? So rather than writing I'm going to write it as value, because it becomes the code more readable, right? So you should always write a code in such a way that you can read it. So let's run this code, and when you run this code, it will loop through this block, through this block, through this int array block, right? The first value we are getting here as 1, the second value is 3 here, third value is 6 here, and the last value is 9 here. So what I'm doing here is I'm looping through this array of integers, and I'm taking this each value and I'm just printing that value here, right? So this becomes very handy, right, while we are dealing with the list data structure, right? So this is what we have for the for loop demo, right? And then we have one more, which we call it as while loops, right? So we will have here again one more called as while loop demo. This is also a loop, and I'm going to have this while loop demo here. I'm going to create one more function, which will be a function while loop demo, and inside this I'm going to write a while statement, right? So to write a while loop, right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have val x of type int, and I'm going to have this value 4, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop it through while x is greater than 0, x minus minus, right? So what I did here is, rather than x minus minus, okay, so while x is greater than 0, so we need to change this to 1, right? I'm doing x minus minus. So what will happen in this loop is this will loop till x is greater than 0, right? So the first thing, so when it executed for the first time, we have here x4. This will be decreased by one value. We call this as decrement operator, right? So this is a postfix decrement operator. So this will be decreased by value 1, and we have a new value as 3, right? And this will be again 3, and then this will in the third loop it will be 2, and it will be 1, right? So still 1 is greater than 0, and when we have here as 0, this will be this code will not be executed, because it returns false when the value becomes 0, right? So I'm going to print this up here. I'm going to print the value of x here. So just to have, you know a separator, I'm going to have a while loop demo here, and I'm going to have all this in every block of code or every function. So here I'm going to have, you know, for loop demo, and here I'm going to have a when loop demo, right? And I'm going to run this code here, right? The while loop demo. So let's run this code, and you'll have here as an output as 3 2 1 and the last value of 0, right? So where is it, right? So here, while x is greater than 0, the first we have the value of, 3, because this has been decremented by 1 in the first loop. In the second loop, the value will be 2. In the third loop, the value will be 1. In the fourth loop, the value will be 0. And when we have this 0, this block will not be executed. That's why we don't have here as -1, right? So this is what the while loop is all about, right? So these are the various control statements in Kotlin, right? And this is how you write all these blocks, right? These are very handy when you are dealing with, data structures like list. So you need to loop in through the list, you need to get those values and do some operation, right? This can be like finding a duplicate in an array, so you need to loop it through array, right? So these where all these control statements, comes handy, or these loop statements come handy, right? In the next tutorial, we are going to start with the collections, and we are going to explore the various collections or various data structures available in Kotlin. Till then, goodbye. See you in next tutorial.